Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Leadership Lenses, a podcast designed for Rosh Yeshiva, heads of school, principals, and any other leader who's looking to move Jewish education forward. And it's fitting that for today's guests, we have two individuals who run an organization whose tagline is actually moving Jewish education forward, or as you would call it in Hebrew, Kadima. So it's our pleasure to welcome Tikvah Wiener and Smadar Goldstein of Kadima Coaching. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Now, Tikvah, Smadar, and I have, in the world of Jewish education, I think all of our paths have crossed many, many times from, work in Europe to North America to conferences and foundations, which tells me that you guys have been in the right places for a long time because, I've seen you there. And I've been really excited to see how this new venture, Kadima, has taken off. I think it embodies a approach to student learning and pushing students and teachers forward in a way that really hits the right notes and is the kind of support our schools can use and grow from. I've seen some great responses on my end from schools and leaders to what you've done. And so what we'll try and do today is learn a little bit of what you've done and poke a little bit behind the scenes on what the challenges have been and hopefully some great piece of advice and wisdom that you can share with our principals and heads of schools who are listening. So either one of you, feel free to jump in. Where did Kadima come from? Like, how did this first get started?
So I'll take this one. By the way, just as a full disclosure, Smadar and I are also sisters for anyone who doesn't know, because the first time people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, I've worked with you, make the connection.
Yeah, I did that quietly offline before we started recording.
Okay. So yeah, no, don't want to take anyone by surprise. And that's also one of the really great parts about Kadima is that I get to work with Smadar, and our third partner is Tavi Kozlo. And that's really the origin story of Kadima is really, I've been doing the work for 10 years. I had the Idea Schools Network, which provided professional development and project-based and student-centered learning for the last decade. And then, of course, many of your listeners probably know is that Tavi and I ran the Idea School, which was a fully project-based learning Jewish high school that was in Tenafly right near us. And then when the Idea School closed, we kept the professional development side. It was the Idea School and Institute, and we kept that going. So we've been doing professional development in student-centered learning, taking what we learned from doing a full project-based learning curriculum and combining that with the work that we'd already done. And we kept that going. And it was amazing to then apply it to traditional schools and see what we could do in different domains. We can get into that later. And then Smadar actually joined about a year. Actually, it was just really a year ago. It was November of last year. And bringing her expertise in, she was working for Better Lesson, which was an online coaching company in student-centered learning. So we were able to really kind of maximize. We took the best practices of both of us, right? And when I was doing a lot of online coaching, we were doing a lot of on-site and combining that to really create how can we actually move the needle, which is really this combination of you want to do the on-site, you want really your cohort in your school or the entire school to be invested in student-centered learning, but you really also need the coaching afterward. It needs to be an ongoing process. And that's what we really have been able to provide with Kadima. That's been really exciting. And we actually...
I'm just going to pause you for 1 second because there's a lot there. And you said one thing that put on the light bulb for me. And that was, you believe you found the way to really move the lever, right? Now, for those listening, you're probably listening to this later, but while we're recording it, we're in the middle of the World Series. I'm Canadian. We got rid of all the other Canada baseball teams, so we are all now Blue Jay fans. In baseball, there's this term, like the Moneyball term, of wins above replacement, right? How much better you are with the player than you are without the player. And to me, that's very much the same thing as you're saying, like, how do we move the lever? We're not just going into schools to have fun with teachers. We're going into schools because we want to shift something. We want to change something. We want to improve something. So can you get into brass tacks with us of without revealing any, confidential information, maybe one school that called you or one teacher you worked with, and what is the difference? What levers get moved and how does it look during that process?
Sure, I can start with this one if you like. I think it's also about who we want to work with. We made what we call our profile of an ideal partner.
Okay.
And one of those things is that we want to make an impact. So we will not coach one teacher in one school because
Okay.
that will not
Okay.
make
Say that again. No coaching one teacher in one school because.
it does not make an impact. That will not move the needle on student-centered learning in the school. If you want to move the needle, you want to throw a rock into the pond. Well, it has to have a certain size if you want to see ripple effects to make it to the other side. So we need a cohort. We need a minimum of 30 hours of coaching, and that can be divided among small group of teachers, not too many, because then again, you're only having minimal sessions. So we need minimal amounts of coaching for a cohort of teachers with ideally leadership involvement and someone with a very successful administration, not someone who's like, oh, we hired you for what? Which has happened to me past and previous.
Okay. So I'm going to try to say, if your school is falling apart right now, don't call Kadima. Right? But I'll say this as we all have the hats where we're running our own small businesses. And for a business to say no to potential customers, to me, is a tremendous sign of your ethics and your focus, right? We know who we want to serve. We're not, you call us and you want to give us money to do something that doesn't make sense. We're not interested. We're interested in making a difference. And that comes from a group of teachers working together in a school. And we know that's research-based best practices, professional development as close to the classroom as possible with a group. Okay, so now let's say I'm a decent principal. I kind of know what I'm doing. I know what classes I hire teachers for, and I'm willing to invest. I've got a group of 4 or 5 teachers who are, let's say, your typical, like, they're pretty good, they're fine teachers, but they're not student centered, they're not engaging, they're not exciting, they're not experimenting. And I say to you, like, I want the full package. Like, I believe in this. Like, this is what I would have said as a principal had you been around. You weren't, so I used better lesson, which, I think you're doing a much, like, you're the next gen, the next improved version of better lesson. So what would that full package then do with my teachers?
So I think Smadar touched upon an important point, which is that we want the educational leader involved, whoever that is. That could be the principal, or that could be the actual, director of teaching and learning. And that we sit down with that person and say, what are your goals for the coaching, for the PD, right? And we have focus areas, right, which are related to either leadership, like, do you want to create a student-centered school? And then also with the teachers, do you want a student-centered classroom culture? You want student-centered curriculum? You want student-centered learning activities and assessments? So it could be any of those, all of those domains, but we have to have those SMART goals, right? And that's what really the package is tailored for, because then we do an on-site, we observe the teachers that in your cohort, in their classrooms, we sit down with them then individually and say, what are each of your goals? So you could have different teachers picking different focus areas, but then we can then assign, create the SMART goals together. Okay, by mid-year, what are you going to have accomplished? By the end of the year, what are you going to have accomplished? In the middle, we're also very big on metrics, so that what is your intake? We do an intake so that we see your baseline, and then we could kind of come back mid-year and then end of year and report back to you.
That metrics, right? The measurable, which is the M in SMART, I find is the most difficult thing for educators to wrap their heads around. So tell us, how would you measure progress? Maybe give me a sample goal that you or one of your coaches did with a teacher, and how would you measure progress so that I, as a principal, can see, oh, like I actually see what's going on there.
So we have we have a series of documentation processes for both participant and the coach. We are very data driven. So every coaching session, the coach fills out a form, which we have called the GRAIN document. That is something that Kadima designed and implements. GRAIN stands for goal, reality, action, impact, next steps. And every session, the coach completes that with the participant. The participant is fully aware of this process. In addition to that, the participant fills out what we call an outcome survey at the end of every session. What was my understanding and what is my implementation ability? Midway through the coaching process, if you purchase 10 sessions or 15, midway through, we also do a midway survey, and then we do an end of year survey. And then if we do workshops, MPLCs, which we usually do, that's the full package. There's also participant surveys for that, as well as regular meetings with the principal, anecdotal meetings with our coaches. We take data from our coaches, and we take data from the school, and we have this written data.
Okay. So the complaint I hear, or the question I hear from a lot of the people I coach, and the nice thing is, I get to hear complaints and questions from across the field these days, as opposed to just fielding complaints from parents in my own school, is, okay, so that's great, but like, so when do you do the actual coaching? It sounds like you're spending the entire time doing your beginning survey and your end survey, your grading, your impact, your outcomes. Like, how long does that actually take? How have you figured out to manage that?
Well, the outcome survey just takes a couple, like literally a minute or two at the end. The grain is a process. That's their coaching process, and they discuss and they talk.
So that is the coaching.
That is the coaching. It's a 45 call. Each online session is 45 minutes. A classroom observation is also coupled with an on-site coaching experience. Not like, oh, we saw you, goodbye. No, it's like, we saw you, let's talk about it. Let's unpack what were the goals. That's also talked about ahead of time. What were your goals? And then they discuss afterwards how it went.
Amazing.
I want to also just give a little life and texture around that, to your point, right? It's not all data, right? Because then there's the art and the science. So the art is the workshops that we give, and then the strategies and the strategies and techniques and protocols that we're supplying a school with, right? Our resources, and we have a really robust, resource bank of projects and of, different, just other, student-centered learning strategies. And then those are the workshops that the school can pick. It can be very bespoke in that sense, really. We're being school-centered, we're being teacher-centered. Again, we're not coming in with like a goal of like, you have to move it in this way. Like, no, what's your school's mission? What are you trying to accomplish in your school? How can we make that, possible for you? It's exciting, right? There's an opportunity. And each session, and so the workshops are chosen by the school, and then the coaching, as we said, is chosen by the individual teachers and leader. So then you're really working with like, we want, there should be this desire, right? I want to do this, and that's the exciting part, right? So it's not, I don't want to like drill on the data, but because the data is important, we do want to see, we have a sense of fulfillment, even when the educational leader looks back at the year and says, wow, we did actually do something. This PD was not a one and done. Someone didn't jump on a table, get everyone excited, and then leave. Right? The devil is in the details. And to your point earlier about the research, right? We know that the research is that PD needs to be ongoing, right? It needs to be domain specific. The teachers need to be able to ask questions about their specific disciplines, right, that are bubbling up for them. We could give a session to the whole team or to the whole faculty, right, in student-centered learning, but then the Tanakh teacher wants to know, how do I do this in my class with my particular textual reading skill goals, right? Or my meaning making in Jewish goal, Judaism goals, like Jewish peoplehood goals. And the math teacher wants to know, how do I do this in a math class?
So that's where all the one-on-one comes in, because you've done a broad workshop. We have key principles that are shared, and then we're doing individual shared instruction. Okay, so you work with a lot of schools. At any point, you can feel free to plead the fifth. That's fine. But I'm really curious. So, like, what are the biggest challenges? What's going wrong in our schools? And again, we're only talking about high-functioning, effective schools. What's going wrong in terms of learning processes that you see? Oh, wow, these are the things we need to work on and improve.
I would say
before you get there. Right after you get there, everything's good. But you can just say, like, when you walk
once
in,
we're there, it's fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, firstly, who are the teachers in the school? And I hear from literally every school I speak with, we don't have enough teachers. And if you hear that in Brooklyn, then imagine how that feels in Amsterdam or Berlin or Panama. Well, you know that also from your work at EFI. So, and you do hear it in Brooklyn. So that's a huge problem. And that comes from wherever it came from. What are we doing to address that? So if you make school and teaching and a profession which is welcomed and elevated and celebrated, then you will retain teachers in your school, give them the skills that they need to feel confident and successful, and you'll ultimately have a healthier school environment with happier students and happier parents. So that's where PD is a natural fit. But I hear from everyone, there aren't enough teachers. We don't have humans in the building, and our standards therefore have dropped. We're therefore hiring Oh, you can,
Non-humans.
right. You speak Hebrew.
We'll be able to hire robots soon. But
Right.
right now we're hiring people who have no teaching background,
Yeah.
and throwing them into the classroom. So that's a huge issue, right? I think it's a huge issue actually worldwide for all
Yes.
schools, and all the more so for Jewish schools, and all the more so for Jewish schools outside major urban centers where the problem's just, compounded exponentially. Well, let's take like somebody who does have educational training. So you're dealing with your typical group of 5 or 6 teachers somewhere in their first 10 years. They've had some training. What are the major challenges that those people or that you're seeing? They may see it, they may not see it, but what are you seeing that just isn't hitting the mark in those classrooms?
I think that the teachers sometimes feel a fear of change. We do a lot of work around, change theory and how to effect change with administrators, right? Giving space to allow for the scariness of change and embarking on a school change. From the teacher end, some teachers feel fear of change and don't want to and will run back to the compliance model because they're just afraid. From the teacher end, sometimes they'll express a fear of, I want to do this, but I don't know if I have the administrator support. Right. So that's why we prefer to work with a cohort that is backed by the leader, because then we know both of them are working towards the same goal. Right. That's why that goal is important to us. So getting over that fear of change, I think, is one of the big obstacles. I think there's a pain point in education, right? That we're
Okay.
seeing a lot of students who don't fit the traditional model. So that's driving
Sure.
a little bit of the change, because the teachers and school leaders are saying, well, what do we do now? So there's some certain disruptions that are happening, whether it is because you said robots, AI, right? Or because of,
Yeah, look, I just to jump in on that for a second, when I was the head of school, and we were a school that really did our best to be inclusive. We were a community school. If you were a modern Orthodox Jew in Cleveland, you're sending your kids to Fuchs Mizrahi school. I know the school still does do that, but whereas when I was there, we were at 15 to 20% various levels of special learning needs among our students. That's probably close to doubled in most schools based on all sorts of factors that none of us can control. So, how does your coaching hit on that issue?
I think it gives space for people, firstly, to acknowledge, right? There's a lot of, like Tikvah, there's a lot of fear. And what you said before, our teachers are fine. Like, let's say you said you're a decent principal, my teachers are fine. Well, what evidence do we have that your teachers are fine, whatever that means? Define fine, right? And what are our goals? Are your goals success, joy, passion, skill, content mastery, exposing values, living values, internalizing values? So is that written anywhere in your school, anything? And
Right.
you want to share that with us? Do your teachers know that? So that's a lot of where, like, we're trying to like shake the tree a little bit and say, well, what is fine? What is good? What is success? What does all that look like? And how can maybe look a little different? And what step are you comfortable taking to work towards the success that we now agreed should be over here, when before it was over here?
Yeah.
That's the goal and the reality.
Right. I definitely wouldn't want to go to any board meeting or donor meeting and say, hey, we're fine. Could you support us this year? We are fine. Not a great approach, not the winning approach. But I know, look, in the head of school world, I myself had a coach as a head. I didn't get to have I had a mentor through the Jewish New Teacher Program when I was a teacher. I actually entered teaching the first year of that program and had a wonderful mentor who Tikvah happens to be related to. And then when I became a head, it was natural for me to have a coach as a head of school. And I would say where I see probably 75, 80% of heads have coaches now. But we're not at the point where 75 or 80% of schools are getting instructional coaches. And I think part of that is we're fine. And part of it is, well, isn't this the principal's job? Right. So if I'm a principal who says to you, you guys are doing a great job, I'm just doing this on my own, I don't know why I need you. What would your response be? Is that correct? Or is there really this separate need for Kadima coaching or some alternative that you bring in to do this level of work with your teachers?
some schools have directors of teaching and learning or curriculum directors, and they are doing some instructional coaching. So there is, I think, 20 years ago, we had the director of educational technology. And then I think that was added to with, directors of teaching and learning. And that's kudos to the field, because I don't think, certainly when we all entered, probably that was not de rigueur, right? So some schools do have that. And actually, oftentimes that's the educational leader we're working with. But I think the addition is certainly the principal usually does not have time to coach the teachers in this more robust way. And I think that in schools that even do have directors of teaching and learning, if you want to do some of the nitty gritty work here that we're talking about, that even those personnel are sometimes overburdened and might not have the time to do this. So it depends also on what your goals are, right? And we're being brought in to do something specific, which is in the student-centered learning domain. And then that feels like a relief, like, here, I want to do this, right? The educational leader or the principal is saying, I want to do this, but I also recognize that I don't have time to do it properly. So I'm gonna offload this to you, as you would with any consultant, right? So that you can do it. I'm gonna be in touch with you because I want to make sure you're doing it the way I want you to do it, right? And that's the ideal, right, relationship.
It's not we're giving it away, right? It's a director of teaching and learning. I
Partnership.
remember when we hired Rabbi Yehuda Channelis to do that job at Mizrahi. I think he was maybe the third in the country. And
Yes.
now last week, Prisma had a gathering of a cohort of directors of teaching and learning, because it's become understood that you need that. And you can't do it all as principal. You have to do supervision. There's a lot of pieces you need to do, but you're saying essentially you augment the work of the principal. The principal is not giving it to you and forgetting about it. They're still interfacing,
Right.
but rather than, spending 300-400 hours a year coaching their teachers, which is what this takes for a small cohort, right? If you have a faculty of 50, it's like 2,000 hours a year. Nobody has that time as a principal. They're partnering with you to be like an extension of their work through your specialization. And then you're helping guide them towards this improvement, which I love what you said before, in line with the school's mission, right? Because there's no single agreement about what a good school is. And you're saying, I'm coming in, I'm taking your guidance. As Smadar said before, you probably should tell everyone that same guidance of what you're trying to do. And then we're going to try and make sure that that guidance is actually lived in your classroom.
Yeah. And remember that, like, we're, if think about now the different amazing professional development initiatives that can be going on at the same time. We're one of them. So Hidden Sparks might be in your school. You might be focused on differentiation with another cohort, even with an overlapping cohort. You might be focused, to mention, you had a channel is like, you might be doing Lifnai V'Lifnim. It works very well with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be working with JNTP with your new teachers or your new administrators. So imagine a school, like, here's the ideal version, right? A school that has all of this PD, so that no matter where you are in your teaching profession, you can always be growing and you're always getting the support that you need. And your school is a robust, exciting, dynamic, forward-looking place because you're getting all this amazing PD. And those teachers that Smadar mentioned, the pipeline issue is being addressed because, okay, maybe they didn't start with pedagogy, but they're sure going to get it once they enter your school. Imagine like sort of a blue ribbon school that has all these amazing initiatives.
Which, I mean, to some people may seem like pie in the sky, and I deal with the financial side of schooling also. So I hear like, well, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. And there's two responses that I always have. Number one is, you really as a school have a choice. You can be in a vicious cycle where people are complaining, people are frustrated, you're losing faculty, you're cutting budget, your product gets devalued, you have to further cut budget, your donations aren't going up, and you're stuck and you're drowning. Or you can aim for a virtuous cycle, which is actually much scarier, because you have to say things like, I'm
Right.
going to invest in JNTP, Lifnai V'Lifnim, Kadima coaching, whatever complement of services and focus areas that you believe are going to enhance your product. And that leads you to the ability to increase enrollment, increase fundraising, increase donations, reduce attrition. Like, whatever a school is paying for Kadima coaching for a year is so much less money than losing one child.
Right.
So it's just, even from a brass tacks, dollars and cents point of view, that's so absolutely clear. It's still difficult to take the plunge. So, my closing word for everyone who is listening today is, it's worth it. right? And as Tikvah just said, doesn't mean you're only doing Kadima, but it means you're saying as a principal or head of school, what do I need to do to build excellence within my school according to my own vision? And I'm going to do that internally as appropriate. And I'm going to partner with external organizations based on their expertise. And we're going to bring all that together, either me as the principal or head of school, or with the aid of my director of teaching and learning, if I have one, so that we can be really clear to everyone about having a great product and building ourselves into that virtuous cycle. So I'll say, I'm thrilled that you guys are doing this. I said that to you privately. I'm saying happy to say it publicly. I love the fact that this is available to schools, and I would definitely encourage people to check it out. It's kadimacoaching.org, correct? That's your website. So
Yes.
check out Kadima, Kadima coaching.org. You can reach out to Tikvah, you can reach out to Smadar, your third partner in crime, Tavi, who is also a old friend who is not on the podcast with us today, but I'm sure any of them would be happy to answer your questions. And from my humble opinion, like, try it out. Have a conversation, see if this can help you. And as we end every podcast similarly, right, we want to hear from you. So give Smadar or Tikvah a call. Think about how to improve teaching in your schools, and then let us know how it goes. Tikvah and Smadar, thank you both for being here. I know you've had a crazy week with course you're running and other things going on, and I really appreciate your taking the time, and I'm sure our listeners do as well.
Thanks so much for having us, Barry.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who's listening. Once you do try it out, you can reach us at Leadership Lenses on Substack, Barry Kislowitz on LinkedIn, or on our website, Kislowitz.consulting.com.